Recording. All right, good stuff. So this is getting the most out of PHP Storm with Drupal 8. I've been working with Drupal 8 for the past year or so, and like just how I use my IDE changed significantly from when I was developing D7. It's like night and day. A little bit about me. I work at Digital Bridge Solutions. We're mostly e-commerce shop in Chicago, focusing on B2B stuff. So a lot of Drupal commerce, a lot of Magento. We're starting up with Oro, if you've ever heard of it. Yes. Actually, it'd be great to close the doors.
Yeah, I think closing the doors is great.
Joe, can you try and close the doors?
We'll try.
Alright, that's much better. So yeah, to repeat this, I work at Digital Bridge Solutions. I've been there about 2 years now. Been working with Drupal about 4. We mostly do e-commerce, so Drupal Commerce, Magento, that kind of stuff, all PHP. My tag is Control Adel on Drupal.org, GitHub, anywhere where I can find it and get it. I don't have a Twitter. I try not to tweet, but feel free to tweet my company and they'll get it back to me. So let's hear a little bit about you guys. How many of you guys are currently using PHP Storm? Awesome. How many of you are using Xdebug with PHP Storm? Same thing. Great. And how many of you have like some type of automated code testing or code sniffing or Git hook that tells you if something's going wrong? Awesome. So this should all be highly relevant to everybody in the room. We're going to start out with plugins. This is the list of core plugins that I consider to be like really essential to my efficiency. The first is Git. Everybody has their own Git interface. I really like the PHP Storm one because it's integrated with my code development, and it's a very nice interface to use. It does probably 60 to 80% of what I need to do on a day-to-day basis. The rest of it I do in the command line. .ignore is a plugin that interprets Git ignore files and really any type of ignore file and highlights it in PHP Storm. So like the boxes, the files are grayed out to tell you that it's not going to get changed, which is super helpful. The Symfony plugin, this is D8 specific. It has a lot of Symfony integration goodness for PHP Storm and kind of does a lot of stuff around the services and annotations and that kind of stuff. Drupal Symfony Bridge is a plugin to integrate Symfony, or integrate the Symfony plugin to integrate with the Symfony plugin for PHP Storm, specifically for Drupal things. And I believe that's mostly services, but I'm not 100% sure about everything that it does. And then PHP annotations, which is required by the Symfony plugin, that does a lot of the auto-completion of annotations in classes and stuff. And Key Promoter X is a new one. So I started working on this presentation a couple months ago, and I was like, I should learn more shortcuts in PHP Storm. So Key Promoter X prompts you, like when you do something with a mouse, to use the shortcut, which is super helpful. Git. So we're going to go through Git quickly. I assume that most of you are familiar with Git and have your preferences for a Git interface. I'm just going to kind of quickly go through the things I find the best about the PHP Storm Git interface. If you guys have anything else that you really like, feel free to shout it out. So the tool window, just to turn it on, there's this little gray box at the bottom of PHP Storm, which opens up this bar. And you can do version control there. And then the version control window is history, which is, let's see. Oh, right. This isn't being tracked in a repo currently. That's good. But anyways, the history, it kind of shows you all the it shows you all the commits in the repo, or all the repos that you're tracking, because PHP Storm can track multiple repos in the same project. So shows you all the commits. It shows you the files that have changed. it shows you what branches this commit is in, and the various tags. You can filter by branch, user, date, path. So it's a fairly nice interface to just kind of navigate a repo. And then there's the local changes, which shows you everything that's changed in the repo and would be committed. So super helpful.
FYI, that's fairly invisible to a lot of us.
Yeah, I actually meant to do. So the way I built these slides is that this is really when you go back to it, they'll be helpful. Most of the presentation will be done in PHP Storm. My example repo isn't a repo. So yeah, the history, local changes, all super helpful. PHP Storm also tracks local history of files. So if we go in here, BCS, local history, show history, it'll show you all the changes that I've made to this file. It can be fairly spotty between sessions, but like if you know you had something working and you then broke it, it's super helpful to go back. The diff view, which was similar to the local I was showing. So any of the files that have changed, it'll bring up a diff of what's in the repo and what's different. Pretty nice. And that's really the interfaces I use the most. It's also really nice for merge resolution. It'll give you a three-way view where you can like arrow things to the left and to the right and to the middle, edit the file in there, and then it'll warn you if you haven't resolved all the conflicts. So pretty nice. All right, that was quick Git. What do we got? Nice. Linting and sniffing. So linting and sniffing linting is something going to break? It's syntax, that kind of stuff. Sniffing is kind of more stylish. Like, yes, this is functional, but is it really nice to look at? You know, is it clean? Can people read it? So PHP Storm has a bunch of different linting and sniffing integrations. The main one for Drupal is PHP-CS, which is PHP Code Sniffer. And what that does is it does all the PHP and style, like sniffing. So it'll highlight within PHP Storm when you're not following Drupal style guide, which if you write patches or just kind of want to keep your code readable with the rest of Drupal is super helpful. Style lint is actually new in 8.4 and it does CSS linting. So if you're writing any CSS, it's super helpful. Eventually, it'll be available for contrib and themes to like run against a patch through Drupal CI, but I don't think that's there right now. ESLint is for JavaScript. I personally don't write a lot of JavaScript, but if you do, PHP Storm has a linter for it, or has integration for ESLint, and Drupal core comes with an ESLint file. And SassLint. So StyleLint is new. I've been using SassLint for the past couple of months, which is super helpful because it has Sass rules for like SCSS files and stuff. So it'll tell you like when you're nesting too deep, or to use a variable instead of a direct color name, and that kind of stuff. And it's all configurable with its own configuration file. I believe StyleLint supports Sass through a plugin, but I've never tried it, so might be worth exploring. Let's see. All right, so this by default, I've got this custom block class. I know the code in there logically is horrible. That's on purpose. But by default, this is what PHP Storm will show you as like errors and stuff. I'm guessing most of you can see a bunch of Drupal coding style errors in this, and it looks really ugly to you. So if we turn on PHP CS, just make sure. All right, so now we got a bunch of other stuff. So you can see that it's saying this function is missing a block doc, or doc block. What else do we got? Build is not in lower camel format, which I'm not actually sure that's right. And then indenting is wrong. So like this whole function is just indented too far. Most of this function. So that knocks out one of them. Build shouldn't have that underscore there. And you can see that there was this red line up here telling us that my class did not implement the build method, which is required for a class implementing the base block interface. So this will, like, the red line will actually throw a PHP error. And yeah, so if I refresh my page, it just doesn't work. And PHP Storm will tell you that. So I'm actually going to leave that for now because we're going to cover how to fix that later. The arrays are a mess. We got double quotes instead of single quotes. We have no period. We have stuff going across the border. So the great thing is that if you set up PHP Storm to use Drupal coding standards, which is like default integration. Yeah, so this is default PHP Storm. You can set it to use the Drupal code style. And you reformat the code through PHP Storm, it'll fix most of it for us. So yeah, like it didn't do the period at the end. It didn't break out my comment. But it did most of it for us. It didn't add a comment here.
Is this session recorded?
The video and the audio, yes. But like there's not a video of the room.
So how did you activate that style again?
It's so to actually turn it on, it's settings, editor, PHP, and that's like all the code settings for PHP. Mm-hmm. And then you choose Drupal from predefined style. And then to actually reformat it as code, reformat code. Yeah. So like it's super helpful, like it's probably decreased the amount of errors I make significantly just having that warning there, even if I don't have like something that's like telling me my commit has to be perfect before it's going to be accepted. And then it'll tell us that the use class, right, we're not using this, so we don't need it. So that's PHPCS, super helpful. I have heard of people setting it to show as an error instead of a warning. So like show as warning, right? You can do show as error, but personally I prefer errors to be things that are actually going to break my site instead of just style guide warnings. But if you're committing and like your commit's not going to be accepted, if the style's bad, then maybe an error is the right thing to do.
And you add custom rules?
So this is, PHPCS is like, it's a command line tool, and it has its own rule set, which Drupal provides its own, like, the coder module provides a Drupal rule set for PHPCS. So yes, you can write your own, or customize the Drupal one.
Is there different ones for Drupal 7 versus 8?
PHP Storm, actually, I'm not sure. I think Drupal only has one style guide, right? I don't know about that.
I don't know if it changed for 8.
Yeah. PHP Storm knows the version of Drupal, like if you set up the Drupal stuff correctly. So if there's a difference, it'll do it for you. Actually, I think I have SassLint turned on here too. So my warning about stuff like SassLint is that it can get overwhelming very quickly. All right, so I copied this directly from, this is a Bootstrap class or file, and you can see that like there's all kinds of errors just by default in Bootstrap with the default SassLint settings. So like if you're gonna do this, make sure that you know what rules you want and like that you actually care about them, because most of this is just, it's all style and how it's gonna be read. It's not functionally different, right? Like, yeah, it's not gonna find my variables because I don't have them. Like it wants me to rearrange all of these so that they're in alphabetical order. Don't really care about that, but maybe somebody does. Question.
Whenever working in a Drupal project, do you recommend someone opening the project from the doc root so it knows all the variables that far back? Or like say I'm a theme, right? So should I be opening the project just from the theme?
Always do the full project, because PHP Storm does a lot of indexing and like auto completion stuff, where if it has access to everything, you'll get a lot more functionality than just opening up the theme.
So the doc root.
Yeah.
Great.
Or even above the doc root if they're using Composer. Like it might just be the entire folder. Like
Like even the whole Drupal install.
yeah, so I'm using Drupal VM, and you can see that like Drupal VM, there's a bunch of Drupal VM config stuff, and then there's the web root, which is the doc root, and this is actually Drupal. But like there's the vendor folder here, which is super important for PHP stuff, and like auto completion is so much better with the vendor folder.
And is there an option to have like, if I'm gonna open it from the whole project, from the whole install, to have a favorite for the theme?
Not that I've tried to find. I know you can do like set bookmarks and stuff, but I'm not sure if, yeah, because like the theme's kind of buried. So if you want to just keep that open, I'm not sure. All right, back to the presentation. So yeah, that was linting and what was it? Linting and sniffing. PHPCS, super useful if you're going to do one of these. Do PHPCS.
You can have the favorites.
Nice. All right, navigating code. So this was by far the biggest change between D7 and D8, right? Object-oriented code, which is nice for development, but kind of a pain to navigate. So I learned a bunch of new navigation tricks in PHP Storm. Shift will search anywhere and everything, which is awesome. Right? So who wants to look up something? Anything? Node-based class? Node-based. There's apparently, there we got some twig. What else do we got? Alright, nodes, way too specific. Alright, we got our form class. Form Ajax response builder. Maybe you're doing something with Ajax. But it'll search everything, and it kind of gives you like, it groups them by what you're getting back, which is helpful. It'll show you the path. So if you know what you actually want. Because, yeah, like we see with Node, there's a bunch of stuff from the vendor folder, there's a bunch of stuff from Drupal. Can be a bit of a pain to circulate through. And this more, I was just doing enter on this. But you can click on it too. It searches like actual file names, it searches symbols. If you have a case where you have like an actual Unicode symbol, I believe it'll search for that too. But I don't do that, so you probably shouldn't do that. Hierarchy view. This is by far one of my favorite views in PHP Storm. So this will actually show you the entire hierarchy of a class. If we close out with this, so we have our custom block class, which extends block base. So if I do Control H on this, it pulls up every implementation, like the entire hierarchy, plugin base, context aware plugin, block base, and then all the implementations of block base, and you know what views. Like it just shows you everything relevant to that class, which is super helpful if you're looking for examples or trying to navigate up the stream. I pull this up all the time when I'm looking for examples of like how to do something, because I'm like, somebody else has probably done this before, and I can just go look at how they did it. You can also do, I don't do this one very often, but I think you can do functions and methods as well. Let's see, Control Shift H. Yeah, so like you can get a function hierarchy, like Actually, I'm surprised the build one doesn't have it, but I believe this would show you, like, if it's calling a parent, like if there's a parent class that's also called, it'll show you that entire hierarchy. Copying paths. So, you know, sharing what code you're looking at is super helpful. And with Drupal, there's a bunch of different files, and it can be hard to describe what you're looking at. So Control-Shift-C will give you the entire path, like, on your laptop, which can be helpful if you're trying to, like, do something on the command line. Or if you just want a relative path with a line number ending, Control-Shift-Alt-C, or just, like, relative to the project with the line number. You do have to be careful with that one, because, like, if you're on a function, it'll append that, like, it'll copy the relative, like the namespace function path, I believe. So if we do Control-Shift-Alt-C on build, yeah, so like it gave us the whole build thing. But if we do it up here, it gives us line 17. So it will change based on kind of what you have selected. So just be aware of that one. Function definitions. Add inherit doc is a nice tag, is so helpful, right? If you do Control Q, it brings up the definition for that, which is nice, so you don't have to go up and down and open up other files. This also works just on function declarations and also on when you call functions. So if we do like this, calculate dependencies, sure. Control Q, right? It'll bring up the definition of that function too. So, like, if you just need it, if you're spot checking something or you just want to really quickly check, it's a great way to bring up the documentation for a function. Go to function declaration. So, if you actually want to go to like the base of where something's defined, Control B or Shift click, I believe it was, Control click. Yeah, so Control B took us right to calculate dependencies in the block-based class. Super helpful. I mostly use this one when I'm debugging and I want to put a breakpoint like at the very top of something. Let's fix my class. Find usages. So if you actually wanted to see like
You also use the square brackets to go back after you've done Control B.
the square brackets,
Control square brackets take you back and forth between things.
control square brackets. So like
If you do Control B, control that square bracket.
it took me to the top of the file.
But you guys, if you click on something in Control B, you get the other thing.
Yeah. Left or right? Right.
Well, I'm on a Mac, so I don't know whether the
Command.
Yeah.
That's just taking me to the top of the file. All right. So yeah. I actually, I think that, I'm pretty sure that does exist. I don't use it very often. Where were we? Find usages, right? So on calculate dependencies, if we do an Alt F7, it'll, since this is what was it saying? Right, it's asking if it wants to do the base method instead of the actual one on this class. So like the base method will find everything. The one on this class will just find stuff that's actually like when this class is being called. So I'm going to do everything, and it'll pull up literally every place that this function's used, and it kind of groups them up by by how they're used. So delegate to another instance method, delegate to super method, method call, usage and comments. So like if you're actually looking for other implementations, this is probably the place to go. You can see it's used in an if statement here. So it can be helpful if you're looking for when to use a function or how to use it. Most actions, so when you have squiggly lines under stuff, let's see, what can I do? All right, let's do like a typo. That's not a real word, and it'll tell me that. If I do Alt Enter, it will give you a bunch of options. Change to, That's not gonna give me, there we go. So I just entered on change to, and I'm navigating with my arrow keys. Welcome. If I get rid of this block base use statement, Alt enter, import class. So most of the times when you see like something highlighted or underlined, you can Alt enter it and it'll give you what actions you can do on it. This is a nice keyboard shortcut because you can usually right click and do the same thing. Gutter icons. So these are tiny little things in the gutter of PHP Storm that are super helpful. The three that I know about are I, O, and H. The I icon takes you to implementations of parent methods or children, or if you're at the parent, it'll show you all the implementations of the child classes, which is useful if you want to pull up all the examples instead of doing like the Alt F7 that we showed. O shows you when stuff is being overridden. It's like build is overriding the block base build method, and it will take us to that if you click on it. And then you can see here's all the implementations of this method. And H is hook, which is useful in D7 and D8. H arrow up is like the base hook declaration, and go to that. H arrow down, I believe, is implementate. Actually, I don't think there's an H arrow down. Let's see if we can find an API class. Why? This isn't going to work. For modules block. There we go. So hook, block view, alter. Here's all the implementations of it. And if you're on the hook, it shows you where the definition is, and then also where it's called, like where the actual hook is called. So this is where the block view hook is called in Drupal core. So if you're working with hooks still, super helpful. And that's it for really navigating code. Does anybody feel like I missed something big? Awesome. I'm always interested to learn more about PHP Storm because I feel like I'm learning something new every week, and there's just so much to know.
I'm not sure of the navigation point, but is there any plugin or maybe implementing for Behat and PHP test?
Yes, there's very good integration for PHP Unit at least. I'm not sure about how great Behat integration is, but I know you can run Behat tests in PHP Storm.
The integration is really robust.
Okay.
Really well. And you can also run debug, so you can step through code as well. It's really good for troubleshooting stuff and figuring things out.
Yeah. So for the recording, apparently the Behat integration is really great. Like you can XDebug through it, and there's, I assume, syntax and code completion as well. Yeah. So sounds like PHP Unit and Behat are supported fairly well.
So if you're in a class file and you want to see all of the functions that that class has inherited, would you use the hierarchy view for that?
All the functions that it inherited. I'm not sure about that one actually. Typically when I do that, I do it this, and I look at what's available. So I'll do this, and I'll just let the auto completion do its thing. I assume there is a view to show that, but usually I'm only doing it when I'm writing code. So this arrow.
Yeah, because it'd be nice to have like the function descriptions and stuff like that too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think. Yeah, so you can pull it up with Control-Shift-I. Code completion and boilerplate. So first, a shout out to Drupal console. It's super helpful for generating boilerplate code, and even though it can generate a lot more than you need, it's way easier to trim it down than to know everything you could possibly like implement. So if you want to like generate a form or an entity or like an event listener, Drupal console is super helpful. As far as actually doing it in PHP Storm, as we saw, it'll give you this nice red error when you don't implement the right methods in an interface or a class. And if you right click, if you do Control I, it'll show you all the methods like that you can implement. So this is the one we actually need, but it gives us a bunch of other stuff that we could do as well. Select that. We want the inherit doc, and we now have a build function. The nicer one though is Alt-Enter. So I got rid of the old one we just did. If I Alt-Enter this, just add method stubs, and it gives us the entire documentation and a to-do. And it'll do that for every required method that a class needs. So usually I do that, and I replace this with inherit doc when I'm done, because I don't need that documentation after I write the function. Alright, that's method 2. Use statements. We kind of already covered this, but when you're auto-completing stuff, PHP Storm will add the use statements for you at the top of the file. But like if you copy something in from Drupal.org or Stack Overflow, and you have this nice yellow highlight, you can just Alt-Enter it and import the class. If there's more than one option, it'll let you navigate all the different classes that it could be until you find the one that you want. And unused classes are shown in gray. So like if you write some stuff and then you don't need it anymore. Like entity type manager. So like if you're doing something with entity type manager and you just don't need it anymore, it's going to show in gray, and PHPCS will highlight it. As far as I know, it doesn't clean up after itself. Like I've never seen it remove a class, but that might just be how I'm deleting things. And that's really all I have for code completion and boilerplate. The only real pain point I've had is like implementing an interface with required methods and the documentation for those required methods. Does anybody else have like any code completion stuff that they use all the time? I know there's this thing that, what was it? Oh, actually, how much time do we have left? Like 12 minutes? All right, we're gonna skip over to Xdebug. Patching, real quickly. D8, patching with Composer, highly recommended. It's awesome. Like I said before, first you can apply patches directly in PHP Storm, either from your clipboard or from a file. Quick patches for contrib modules. If you're working with a contrib module and your repository is using Composer, there's this tag called prefer source, which will install the repo versus a package. You can then declare that as a new Git root in your project, and PHP Storm will track changes to those files. And then that's really great for like if you're debugging a contrib module or like writing a quick patch against a contrib module. And then PHP Storm can generate patches, but you can also use your favorite patching method. I prefer Git actually over PHP Storm. And then Xdebug. Xdebug is awesome. I wanted to make sure I got this in here. So configuring Xdebug, there's a bunch of configuration around it. I personally use Drupal VM and PHP Storm, which means I have 2 button clicks to make it work, but it can be more involved with that. More involved than that depending on your setup. Enabling Xdebug, like I said, is 2 clicks for me. In my browser, there's this little bug here, debug, that turns it on in the browser, which tells Chrome to like send the right Xdebug headers. And then PHP Storm, there's this phone up here, and that tells it to listen for those headers. setting breakpoints. So we've got this nice class. What if we want to know whenever this class is called? You click in the gutter here and you get this red mark. And we turn on, actually fix the class, delete this. Alright, so we should get it should stop. Right, so you can see that's just, the browser's hanging right now, and that's because it's waiting for PHP to finish. So we've successfully put a breakpoint on our class, and this will stop whenever like this class is called. So the interface, we set our breakpoint. Over here is the resume button, stop. This button lets you manage all the breakpoints in your code, so if you have a bunch, it's nicer than going to the file and finding them. You can also delete them, which is handy if you don't want them anymore. This will mute all the breakpoints in your code, so if you're just annoyed and you want to actually run something without stopping at every single one of your breakpoints, you can do that. You can also conditionally mute them. But I'm not sure if we can do that right now while we're stopped. And I don't know what the buttons down here do. I think these are mostly PHP Storm buttons. So, and then you can see on the left here you have a call stack. In the middle, this is all the variables available and their values. And on the right you have watches. So watches, like over here I can watch the class variable, add the watches. And this is really helpful for like when a value is really nested deeply inside another variable, because it'll set the value here instead of having to navigate through this, because the hierarchy won't, like if I navigate in this variable, and I pick something out of here, like this isn't going to stay open when I refresh the page or when I resume. So it's not going to like that one, but most of the times it'll work. Resume. Alright, so our site is not working. Alright, so you can see I've added this block here. The message changes randomly. I saw my breakpoint set. Yeah, so you can like turn off individual breakpoints, and you can see the green right there. And that's just, you get this pulled up by right clicking. So you can see the message is changing. Now, let's say we want to really inspect what the message is going to be before it's sent out. Or perhaps we have an error with like one of the values, or one of the key values. So I'm going to set a breakpoint on this if key, key equals chosen message line. So you can see the chosen message is key 2. The key value is currently 0, and the message is, well, nothing right now. Alright, that works for me. I'm going to set another breakpoint down here at the return. I'm actually not sure which line I need. Since it's stopped, these new breakpoints will get hit immediately. It's not going to like complete its request, and you're not going to have to refresh the page to hit these. But I don't want to go through this loop. So this is the message that the code selected, but I don't like that. So you can change the value of variables, exclamation marks. This is a silly example, but it's really helpful, like when you're actually debugging something or when you're trying to write some code, that you can change variables like on the fly at a breakpoint. So we let that finish, and you can see we have our exclamation marks in the front end here. You can also do conditional breakpoints. So like if I only cared about when the key equals 3, I can do that. And so this will only stop when the key equals 3, right? So refresh the page, key value 3. So it skips 0, 1, and 2, and is only showing us 3. Actually, and I think, let's make sure I'm not skipping too much. Covered the interface, evaluating code. This one's important. So you can change values, but you can also evaluate code when you're stopped. So right click, evaluate expression, or Alt F8. So if I wanted to get the value of chosen message, I could do that. But most importantly, and this is super helpful when I've been developing, is autocomplete works, and it also it also returns the value of your call, right? That's not helpful. Get base ID, right? So instead of writing some code, refreshing the page, and seeing what happens, you can just test out your statements here and see what they're going to return at that point in the code. So no more. I've pretty much stopped using like DPM because I just don't need it with this. When I write a new method, I put like one breakpoint in. I write out my code. I test my questionable calls in this box here, and I fix them if they're not returning the right values. It's really helpful on like entities with fields because there's all kinds of fun ways to access values on a field. And this makes sure that I get it right the first time instead of kind of guessing and hoping it works. Vendor mapping. So if you want to put a breakpoint in a vendor file, you actually have to map that separately in PHP Storm. So it's languages and frameworks, PHP, servers. So like I need, right now if I put a breakpoint in the vendor folder, nothing would happen. But if I do var /dub/dub/ /Drupal VM / what is it? Drupal / vendor. Now my breakpoints would work in the vendor folder. And that's one of the things, like PHP Storm is pretty good about doing the web root, the doc root, but it doesn't always get the vendor folder. So if you're not stopping in the vendor folder, that's probably why. You can see also on the left here, there's different URLs, like you can have multiple URLs that stop at it. So if you're doing a multi-domain site, you have to declare each mapping individually. I think I was able to speed through most of the Xdebug stuff. Let's see if I'm missing anything on the interface. Oh, step over and step into. So step over, well, it'll let the current line complete and then go to the next line, but you don't have to set a breakpoint. Step into will actually take us into this if statement. So like step into. It didn't function how I thought it would. Anyways, you can use step over and step into and force step into and step out to navigate like through the code line by line, like step by step by step without having to set a breakpoint at every line of code. So like if I set one up there, chosen message, refresh the page, and I just step over this line, it'll take me down to the next line and the next line. It'll just keep going through line by line. All right, I think that was everything I wanted to cover. Oh, PHP CBF. This is PHP Code Beautifier. You can integrate it through an external tool in PHP Storm, and it's like that reformat that we saw at the beginning, but it'll do it so much better. It'll actually do a bit more than like the PHP Storm reformatting will do. These are my configurations. I'm not 100% sure if they work with D8, but I think they do. And other things PHP Storm does, composer management is new to one of the versions of it's in a newer version of PHP Storm. I haven't tested it, but I know it's a thing, and it tells me about it every time I open up PHP Storm. And then Matt Glayman has written a Drupal test running plugin for PHP Storm. Matt Glayman works with Commerce Guys. He does a lot of Drupal contribution. So if you're doing contribution and you're running your tests, there's a plugin for that. I personally haven't used it. And I think that gets us to time. Does anybody have any questions? We can go over a little bit. Yes.
So when I use XDebug, sometimes I want to do it with versus Drush scripts, and I've made it work, but not consistently, and I can't tell what it is that I need to do exactly.
I've tried this as well because I'm running a VM and PHP Storm is on my laptop. I haven't gotten it to work successfully, but I've seen multiple guys where you have to turn it on in the actual command line PHP configuration,
Right.
and then there's something about passing ports, I think. But yeah, I haven't gotten that to work successfully either. But I've read guys that say it's possible.
Yeah, I used that successfully for a while and then stopped because if I was working on multiple projects, no matter where I ran Drush, PHP Storm would grab it and stop.
Oh,
And I had to turn it off almost immediately as a result. Because no matter where I was when I did the Drush command, it just stop and hang, and I wouldn't remember why.
And a general warning about Xdebug, it does affect performance. So if your site's running slow, you should probably turn it off. But if you're debugging, it's well worth it.
It really affects Composer performance.
Yes. Yes, it does. All right. Any other
There's
questions?
also a thing called Productivity Guide.
Yes.
Help menu. So if you could demo that,
Window or help
help me.
productivity guide. So this will show you like how much time this has saved me, or when last time I used a command. Let's see. I used one a year ago. Tag name completion. Code completion I've used 6,500 times. Syntax aware selection 12,000 times. Yeah, it's kind of cool to look at. Also in the help menu is a key map reference. So we'll pull up all the shortcuts. And I nearly forgot, but I have those printed out from PHP Storm. So I'll go put these out up here. I also have stickers from them. So those will be up here then. We can go like 3 more minutes.
I used to pull VM2 and I've noticed that PHP Storm is saying, hey, Docker is there. What do you want to do? When you start it up, have you looked at any of that?
PHP Storm will integrate with Docker and Vagrant, but I haven't done any of it.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Oh, yeah. Do you have this?
Yes, they're on my GitHub. I'll try and get those. I'll post them up to the session description as well, and then they'll be fully available.